Today we'll be taking a look at the Telcoin and the Solana charts as well as the heat maps for each. The Crypto Fear and Greed Index is currently sitting at 19, still resting within the extreme fear category, but has improved just a little bit. The crypto sentiment is getting very close to the 50 line right here in the center of the chart, currently resting at 48.786. Still in the somewhat bearish category, but getting very close to the positive side of the chart. And with the way the markets have been trading over about the last 6 to 7 months being extremely bearish, and after hitting the recent low, price has basically been trading sideways, which is leaving a lot of traders and investors wondering exactly what is going on and what's going to happen. And with so many traders and investors alike in the crypto market losing faith and moving closer and closer to capitulation, which is what it's going to require in order for us to see the bullish reversal that we're all waiting for. With most people looking so far into the future and others looking back on the charts when we were trading in much better price action. But one thing that you always need to remember is you're looking at now. Everything happening now is happening now. And if you're wondering when will become now, the answer is simple: soon. And as always, this is not financial advice and is nothing short of the rantings and ravings of a man who is, in fact, your father's brother's nephew's cousin's former roommate. But do me a favor and hit the like button before we get started. I would really appreciate it. First off, jumping over and taking a look at Telcoin. This is the weekly chart. Since the Trump election pump, once price jumped up on this massive move right here, hitting the high on February 10th, 2025, price has fallen down into an ABC correction, which is a 5-wave move down for the wave A, a 3-wave move up for the wave B, and a 5-wave move to the downside for the wave C. Now jumping over to the daily chart so that we can zoom in on the wave C a little bit closer. The wave C, which is a 5-wave move to the downside, now looks to be trading within the subwave of that subwave in the wave 5, which is also a 5-wave move. Now it's hard to determine whether or not we've actually put in this wave 4 yet, but with this sideways price action that we can see right here, there's a very good chance that we haven't, as it's likely trading sideways right here is accumulating quite a bit of liquidity resting up above these highs. Keep in mind this is Telcoin, it's not a very large market cap, but there is liquidity piling up above these highs and below these lows nonetheless. And as I talked about in my recent XRP and XLM video, believing that we could move up, seeing this wave 4 come up and take this upper liquidity, we can see right here that this candle came pretty close to the 0.5 fib, but has been trading to the downside. So there's a very good chance that at some point we still could get this bounce to the upside, pushing potentially to this 0.618 right here at 0.314 cents. And with this lower trend line right here of the overall trend, essentially what that would be doing is by coming up to the 618, it would be taking out this liquidity resting above these highs, retesting this trend line right here, which is below the entire pattern if you go all the way back on the chart, with this being the first time price has ever traded below it. Then seeing a reversal moving into the final wave 5 to the downside here, which would then take the liquidity resting below these lows right here. We also have this bullish order block right here on the weekly to potentially act as support. I'm not entirely sure that it's going to go down to these fib levels, that it will go quite this low, but it very well could, with the 1.618 sitting at 00174, the 1.702 sitting at 00167, and the 1.786 sitting at 0016. Now jumping back over to the weekly chart really quick, as depressing as these fib levels right here might sound to the ear, taking a look at the CCI right here, how the blue line crossed below the yellow line, came down here into the oversold territory, and is now moving back up towards this white line entering into the blue range, and looks to be getting very close to crossing over the yellow line. We can see this look that it has right here. It spent quite a bit of time here in the oversold range, going back since the end of January. The previous time we were oversold, we didn't last in this area for very long. Looks like about 3 weeks. Now looking at this pattern that we have right here, The last time this pattern occurred and correlated with the CCI was right here. Now, if we look at the two of these, they look very similar to each other. The blue line dropped down below the yellow, came down, ranged in the oversold, came up to the white line, crossed over the yellow line. We can see that it looks very similar to the CCI right now. And when this occurred last time, after the blue line crossed over the yellow line right here, it was approximately 56 days later that Telcoin broke out of this pattern, and in doing so, went on a run over the next 98 days that took it up about 833%. If we come off of this low right here, overall, this move took about 161 days and went up nearly 10x. Now, I'm not saying that's exactly what's going to happen, but this is nearing the end of this ABC correction, now in the final stages of the Wave C. And if you've watched my previous videos on Telcoin, you know what I'm thinking about this particular crypto. I am still continuing to buy Telcoin. I was buying a little bit each day. Now I'm buying a little bit about every 3 days because I've built a position that is about 3 times larger than I had originally planned, and am now holding a very large position. Now jumping over to take a look at the liquidation heat map. This is on the 3-month chart. We can see where price is trading down here. Liquidity is very, very sparse. There's hardly any liquidity resting down here below current price, even below these current lows. And even above the current price, liquidity is very sparse, even though it does start to increase a little bit moving into this section here. But the thickest bands of liquidity on the chart are kind of spread out between this area here, and these areas right through here, pushing all the way up to about that 0.006 cent range. And we can see just looking at this map right here that it was trading quite active in this particular area here. Coming down through here, lots of liquidity was being generated off of these lows. Once price came up to this high and dropped down and hit this low, very little liquidity has showed up back on the board. We can see that it looks like a lot of people have lost interest in Telcoin here, which is one of the main reasons why I've been accumulating it so much, is because it's off of people's radar. But being such a low cap cryptocurrency with very little liquidity, it's not going to take much money to move this thing. This isn't a short-term trade for me, it's a longer-term hold. I'm planning on holding till likely 2030, 2032 range, and I'm almost positive that it's going to be worth more then than it is right now. This tends to be the way things go in cryptocurrencies, is people lose interest in buying anything unless it's hot. And we can see that it's starting to trade sideways right here. We are getting an era of a little bit of accumulation going on, which is very common before we have reversals. Now jumping over and taking a look at the 1-month chart. It's a little bit easier on this chart to see where the liquidity is sitting because it's dialed into a smaller time frame. But as you can see, the liquidity below the current price is very thin. There's almost nothing here in regards of what's on the exchanges, which means there's really no purpose to pushing it down in this area. Because even though the liquidity on the heat map is very sparse, the majority of the liquidity is resting above the current price. But it certainly wouldn't surprise me to see price take out this previous low, and if things got really bad, even this previous low right here. In which case, I would just continue to buy more. But eventually, this move to the downside is going to run out of momentum. And when that time comes that Telcoin reverses, just like we saw not too long ago when I called the last breakout, we all know how quickly Telcoin can move when the interest sparks up and people start buying again. And if you think about Telcoin in terms of EUSD, which is the stablecoin that is used by Telcoin Bank, with everything going on in the Clarity Act right now, with bankers fighting with the exchanges and these different crypto companies over paying yield on stablecoins, we know for a fact that the banks don't want these companies to be able to pay yield because it would cause capital to flood out of the banks and into stablecoins. Because banks pay basically zero yield, to where stablecoins you could earn 4 to 5%. But even if this does get added to the Clarity Act, and these stablecoin companies are not able to pay yield, that's where you really need to do some thinking. Why is it that Ripple is trying so hard to become a bank, and Telcoin is already a bank? So basically, in the world of stablecoins, the only companies that will be able to pay yield are likely going to be the ones that are also banks, like Ripple, like Telcoin. If you're looking for a place to swap your cryptos for zero fees, use my link and sign up for BitUnex. You'll be glad that you did. Now jumping over and taking a look at Solana. This is on the weekly chart. I'll be looking at two different charts in terms of Solana. When we put the fixed volume profile, segmenting it on each of these bull runs versus the bear markets, we see something very interesting. When we go back to the beginning right here when Sol first started trading, marking out this first bull run, which pushed up right here, which lasted 539 days, we can see that the area of the most traded volume occurred right here, quite a ways below where the high ultimately ended up for the wave 5. When we look at this bear market right here, it lasted 420 days. When going off of this high, doing the exact same thing we did here, pushing to where it hit the bear market, we can see that the average volume profile was trading right here. Price traded slightly below it before breaking out into the next bull market. Doing the same thing going off of that low all the way over here to the next bear market. This bull market lasted 749 days. The average volume profile shows that the most concentrated area of trading was right here, well below the wave 5 termination. Dialing in a little bit closer here, we can see that we have been in a bear market now for 413 days, which when we look back on the previous bear market is very close to the length we saw during that last bear market. This bull market was quite a bit shorter than this one, but when we look at the charts the way it's laid out here, this bull market was a 5-wave impulse to the upside, followed by a 5-wave move to the downside during this bear market. The next bull market was a 5-wave impulse to the upside, and the main difference that we're seeing now is we're not trading within a 5-wave impulse to the downside. We're trading within an ABC zigzag. A 5-wave move is a sign of a major correction. An ABC is a very good sign of a potential continuation. Now, jumping over to my other chart, which is still on the weekly, we can see that this ABC zigzag to the downside was a 5-wave move down for the wave A 3-wave move up for the wave B, and is now a 5-wave move to the downside for the wave C, of which we are currently trading within the wave 5 of the primary subwave of the wave C. And just like Telcoin, it's impossible to tell at this point whether or not this wave 4 is actually complete, or whether or not we could see that push to the upside, which I think is the most likely outcome. So far, Solana has pushed up to about the 0.5 fib, but there's still quite a bit of room to push up to the 0.618. But it's unlikely that it would get much higher than that because it's capped off right here with a bearish fair value gap on the weekly chart. And we still have the wave 5 remaining, which very well could push down into these fib levels right here, with the 1.618 sitting at $52, the 1.702 sitting at $47.94, and the 1.786 sitting at $44.14. But we also have something very interesting here on the charts. We can see that the CCI, just like Telcoin, looks to be priming up for a very nice move, which very well could give us the juice we need to pull this move off. But when looking at the CCI, this actually to me looks like it could be setting up for an even larger move. So it'll be interesting to see how this ends up turning out. But we are showing a strong bullish divergence right here on the CCI between this point right here, this point here, and even pushing down into this area. It doesn't happen often, but you will see it many times with divergences where they will come down, hit a point, move up, then come back down and bounce off of that divergence trend line on another occasion. And it's interesting that this strong bullish divergence pushes right down here to the 1.786 fib. So it'll be interesting to see how this turns out, but just looking at the CCI, this definitely makes me think we're going to see at a minimum this move to the upside. And as long as it doesn't break this wave 1 right here of this 5-wave move, this pattern remains perfectly valid. And jumping over to take a look at the liquidation heat map, this is on the 3-month chart. We can see after setting this low right here, it cleaned out quite a bit of that liquidity. And you can see that there's a lot of fear in the market here because not a lot of liquidity is piled up under these lows, which is kind of funny because this is when you would want to buy. When you're pushing towards the bottom, you would want to be dollar cost averaging. Now you can see when we compare it to this area right here, when price came up to this high here and started dropping, people were adding to these positions as it was going up. You can see where this liquidity line is moving up right here. People were adding liquidity the entire time. Then once it started to drop, lots of people got liquidated, and now that we've hit a low that's way lower than this area, suddenly nobody's interested in buying. The vast majority of retail is wired completely backwards in terms of investing and trading. We're seeing the exact same sideways action that we were seeing on Telcoin. This is accumulation. And when we look below the current price, there are billions and billions of dollars worth of liquidity stacked below, even pushing down right into that area where those fib levels were resting on the charts. And looking above current price, there's billions and billions of dollars up above, with the thickest band of liquidity resting right here above this previous high, sitting at about 11.7 billion. Another band, equally thick, which is sitting right about the same amount. The vast majority of liquidity is by far resting above current price, starting right here in about this range of $145. Now, what do you think's going to happen when this wave 5 comes into play, clears out this last little bit of liquidity, and there's nothing left for the market makers, the institutions, and the hedge funds to exploit? I think the answer's pretty obvious. We're going to see price reverse and come after this. But that's certainly not financial advice, that's just my opinion. The only private community in the world that has the XRP cipher.